Alrighty, welcome to the first lecture, guys. So, as requested, we're going to be talking about tapering and peaking for netball performance. So, that was a question that came from a couple of the girls. But as we are going to start with every one of these lectures, we're going to go over a recap and sort of what's coming. So, what we have been working on, as most of you would know, is our fundamental movements. So, our squat, bench, hip hinge, and core. Now, with our hip hinge, that's generally going to be like our RDLs and stuff. You'll all know that. Our squat pattern is our squat pattern, of course, bench for those nice, powerful pecs. And then our rep range has been around that 4 to 12. Now, this is always going to change, obviously, depending on the accessories, but I just want you to think that that is more when we're talking about our major movements. Our rep max, we've been working around that 80 to 95%. And of course, the complexity of movement has been somewhat low. Now, in contrast, what's coming next, we're going to start working more on our strength power. Our strength power, as you can see there with the rep range, it does start to change slightly. We won't have as higher reps. And of course, that is including our accessories as well. Now, with our strength power, we're going to be working more on our squat, bench, and jump. So there's going to be a bit more explosive movement in there. Our rep max starts to go down. So it's not our traditional strength where we're pushing really, really heavy. We're going to have a fluctuation there if we're working specifically on power or if we do start to work on some strength. And our complexity is starting to slightly increase. So it will just start getting a little more complex, and that's going to be like our jumps. So that kind of movement there. So moving into the guts of the lecture, what is tapering? So we can see here with our graph that with our taper, it's about a short-term reduction in training load. So we can see here the load is starting to decrease. And then what this is trying to do is reduce fatigue. So we've got SSA coming up, our senior state age. The idea being is we start to reduce the overall fatigue that is accumulated within the sessions. And of course, across our entire training and then this is aimed to maintain performance. So we see here, we can see the taper, the overall load is starting to drop off. We've got our optimal reduction, and this is over a bunch of different days. So we've got our what is considered an optimal amount of length. So 14 days from the literature has been shown to be most optimal. We can, of course, work around that so we can have more aggressive tapers that last around sort of 7 days. That's quite traditional. They can, of course, extend out. However, we do start to see our preparedness really drop off if we start to lengthen that taper. Now, you can see preparedness down here in the sense of it being low is that overall preparedness, both mentally and physically. So if we've not done a taper, we're still training really, really hard, both in the gym and on the court. If we're training really, really hard, we're not going to be prepared for our overall game or carnival in this case. So as we can see, as those days increase, the taper keeps dropping, we're getting more and more prepared. So up next, so why do we taper? As I said, we basically want to make sure that we're ready for the games. Now you can see there's a few different types of taper here. We've got what is considered, the optimal length, and then as it starts to get longer, we can see everything starting to decrease. So if you do want to pause there, you can have a look. We've got our taper, fatigue, preparedness, and fitness. Now, what we're aiming for with our taper is what we've seen in the literature is we can get between a 1% and 6% boost in performance. Now, this doesn't seem like a lot, but if you imagine you're doing multiple tapers throughout a year, when we get into the main playing season, of course, you're generally going to be at a maintenance phase. But when we go into these carnivals, and of course, when we're training in the off season, multiples of these tapers are going to be more and more beneficial. So we can see anywhere between 1 and 6 increase in performance. However, generally what we're aiming for is that 2.5 to 3. So somewhere in the middle. If we're getting around there, it's really, really good. The reason we also do this is to reduce injury. So if you're in that optimal state, there's going to be less likelihood of injury. You would have recalled that I mentioned about fatigue. As that fatigue lowers, so our accumulated fatigue lowers, we are in a better position to perform. And of course, it improves with focus and recovery. So you're going to be more alert for the carnival, and you're going to hopefully be recovering better. Now, you will also, of course, see this potentially start to go the other way as the carnival progresses. It's 4 days off the top of my head, with, I believe, in the first couple of days, something like 4 or 6 games in a day, if I recall, I guess depending on the age group as well and how many teams. So if we're in this optimal area to perform, then of course this, as I said, it does improve focus and recovery and reduce that injury risk. However, because it's going to be so intense over that short period, also expect a drop off. So you can imagine if we're around here, I don't know if my cursor is showing, but if we're around that peak point, as you can see, the optimal taper length, if we're right at the top when we're looking at preparedness, that's really, really good. If we're on either side of that, so we're down the bottom, that doesn't put us in a very advantageous position. So keeping that in mind for me. So how it works. So this is a very, very basic graph of sort of where we are now. Hopefully I can get a cursor to pop up here. No, it doesn't look like it. Okay, so starting from left to right. So we've got our time down the bottom on our x-axis, and on our y-axis, we've got physiological changes. Now that first arrow you can see, that dotted line, homeostasis, that's where we are. That's where we're in a normal state. Now, when we first train, we create fatigue. You see that blue line dropping down. Very normal, very good. We can't improve without creating fatigue. Now, that fatigue obviously creates a stimulus. And then as we bounce up, so we have that little bit of rest. Now, this isn't a long time. This could just be over one day, over a couple of days. It all depends. And it also depends on how hard you train. So the harder you train, the bigger that dip in fatigue going down. You don't train very hard, that fatigue dip isn't very big. However, you'll see that second red arrow, it's pointing to basically where we get back to homeostasis. As we go above that line, we have this phenomenon called supercompensation. Now, this is where you get better. Think about getting stronger, thinking about getting faster. We need to create fatigue in order to have stimulus. And then once we recover from that fatigue, we enter supercompensation. So we've just basically improved. It's the easiest way to put it. So once we reach supercompensation, we then want to create fatigue again. We'll drop, but not as low as in the first one. We create the same amount of fatigue, roughly, drop down, and then repeat the process. However, if we don't create that stimulus again, you'll see the supercompensation line starts to dissipate, and we will go back to our homeostatic state. So the beginning, in quotation marks. So training increases fitness and fatigue. However, the taper reduces fatigue, which retains fitness, and it is our readiness peaks. So that's just basically how it works in a very, very simplistic way. So some key components of the taper. So volume is reduced by about 40 to 60%. This is where I come into play. Now, of course, this is done ideally across the board. So we call it our global program. So that would be things, everything. Like obviously we can't reduce stress and stuff at school. That's a must. So when it comes time to being on the court, when it comes time to being in the gym, we're trying to reduce the overall volume of around 40 to 60%. However, the intensity remains the same. Now, for those coming to that last session on the Wednesday, this will not be the case. We are focusing merely on mobility. So, of course, we can't have intensity of mobility, but just keeping that in mind. So we want to keep the intensity the same, but we make it a lot shorter or a lot less by over half. The frequency is slightly reduced. Now, frequency is how many times we're doing it. So, for example, if you were on the court twice, if you were in the gym twice, we would slightly reduce the frequency. So it might just be cutting back one gym session, something like that. We're doing mobility. Of course, everyone trains in the gym once a week. We can't cut that back completely. Otherwise, that would be a huge reduction in frequency. But as I said, focus on mobility, stabilization. And the duration is 4 to 7 days. So you can see all of there in a nice graph what we're aiming for. So our volume, intensity, and frequency, it all slightly drops. Well, sorry. Our intensity stays the same, but our frequency and all of that, as mentioned. So then some common tapering mistakes. So this can be more when you're doing it yourself or if other people have done it incorrectly. And of course, this is all referred back to the literature. So cutting too much intensity. So if we basically make the program too easy, in the sense of we go from, or use some arbitrary round numbers. You've been doing a 60 kilo squat, and then you cut it back down to 20 kilos. That intensity has dropped way too far. We would want to say keep the 60 kilos if you were doing it for 10 reps, maybe drop it down to five or six. So we've kept it in around that 40 to 60% range of reduction in volume. One size does not fit all. So what, say, someone in grade 12 or 11 might be doing might not be ideal for someone in grade 10 because of different external stresses. Like I said, with school, it could be exams and stuff. So grade 12, very important year. Grade 10, still important, but the stress may not be there. Likewise, someone that is no longer in school, their tape is going to look different as well. There's certainly different in environmental and external stresses. So how we do that taper would vary slightly. Now, of course, because we're in a team sport, we have to go with what's best for the team. So we're trying to hit a majority rather than a minority. However, there are things you can do as an individual which will also benefit. But that's more of a kind of a one-on-one chat, sort of what works with your situation. Otherwise, we'd be here all day playing hypotheticals. And then, of course, ignoring recovery basics. Now, recovery basics there are our sleep, hydration, and nutrition. They are the utmost important. They're more important than the gym. They're more important than being on the court. Anything else, sleep, hydration, nutrition, that is number one. Always comes first. But then there's other things like I said, our mobility, still getting out and doing stuff. So like going for a walk, being able doing fun stuff that helps reduce stress, which increases recovery. So doing stuff you enjoy, very, very important. So, some final thoughts around our tapering. So, we want to reduce court work volume. Now, this is, of course, up to the coach, but it's something to keep in mind. So, if you feel like you're doing a lot of stuff on the court still, and this is, of course, in the gym as well, if you feel like you're going just as hard right before a big carnival, it's probably not a good idea, and it might be worthwhile just merely raising the question with the coach. But we're hoping everyone is on board with tapering and how it goes hand in hand with performance. So that might not be a thing, but something to keep in mind as well if one day you feel like you might want to get into coaching. We might want to focus on speed and skills. So these are nice, short, sharp drills. The intensity is still really high, but our volume is very easy to manage. So we might just play small-sided games for 3 to 4 minutes. Very, very fast, very intense, but we're not increasing that fatigue. We want to still keep the intensity the same. So match simulation and hydration and sleep, of course, so small-sided games. We've got a few days, so sort of what we're focusing on, say days 1 to 3, we're reducing the volume, the short, high intensity, light recovery, rest, and then boom, game day. And that's over a 10 days. So I know 14 is optimal, but of course we need to work in with life as well. So tapering is all about smart planning. It's about timing, not reducing training, and it builds confidence for game day. Very, very important. So the other question that was asked was recovery protocols. Now, this is a very, very deep subject. We can go down rabbit holes for almost ever. So I've tried to keep this very basic, and I encourage asking questions. Post them, reach out, whatever it might be. We can talk more there. But these are some basic recovery protocols which will help both prior to the carnival and or game and also after and in between. So post-training nutrition, very, very important. This is also for each day of the carnival. You want a 3-to-1 carbs to protein. Now, of course, because it is post-training and or games, we want to have those high carbs so we're able to refill those energy stores. We want to make sure that our glycogen stores are nice and high so we can convert that glycogen to glucose, i.e. fuel. We want lots of fuel. Of course, probably this drum has been beaten to almost death. Hydration, Lots of water, guys, but lots of water also means that we need to make sure we're getting our electrolytes, being our salts. Otherwise, we become too diluted and it is not good for performance. Simple things like a Gatorade, very, very good there. I will warn against a sugar-free or low-sugar Gatorade, guys. That is basically just flavored water. If you enjoy Gatorade and stuff like that throughout the day, then when you're not playing or training, then yeah, the sugar-free version's great. But we want that full sugar, full salt version for after training, also during. Very important, guys, especially when you're playing a carnival and you're playing multiple games a day. We've got to have those sugars and salts in our liquid forms. That is going to be the most important to making sure that we're not cramping and that we're still able to perform well. Of course, active recovery. Now, active recovery here is going for walks. It's still doing movement. It could even be just doing walkthroughs of gameplay to have a chat. Active recovery is very, very important. We don't want to just be sitting down and then stiffening up. Sleep hygiene in the sense of making sure that we maintain a sleep schedule. So what your sleep schedule has looked like prior, we want to maintain. And then our modalities just simply is referring to things like stretching, triggering, all of that good stuff that we do. Not a lot of evidence around that. However, if it is in your routine and it is something that you do consistently, keep doing it. Don't stop. If you also find that you do get some benefit from it, fantastic. Keep going. Now, some other recovery extras I've got here. So this, of course, will most likely involve money. It's our ice baths post-comp. Now, I need to be very, very specific here, guys. You do not want to be doing ice baths the day of. On day one, at the end of day one, we probably want to avoid ice baths just because we want that inflammation, that very acute, so minor inflammation to occur because it is extremely important for the healing process. After the comps, after 4 days of absolutely beating the bodies up, yeah, ice baths are great. Get in there if that's something you enjoy. If you don't enjoy it, don't do it. The literature there is still, it's merging, but it's not great. Basically, if you don't enjoy doing it, you're probably not going to get as much benefit to doing something you do enjoy. Massage, there's a bit of literature there also saying that massage doesn't really help with sore muscles. So DOMS, delayed onset muscle soreness. However, if you do enjoy it, it's very, very relaxing depending on the type of massage you get. So if you enjoy it, absolutely do it. Of course, bit of money involved there. Sauna and hot baths, so heat therapy. This is actually really good. It promotes circulation. It's a vasodilator, so it dilates the blood vessels. Very good for circulation. The opposite of that, ice baths, it constricts, so it prevents circulation. Obviously not to an extreme point where it's bad, but just think if we're in hot, so whether it's a sauna or a hot bath that promotes vasodilation, obviously the ice bath is going to promote vasoconstriction. So keeping that in mind. So these are just a few very simple glossed over recovery techniques, guys. If you would like to discuss more in sort of what would be better for you, by all means, as I said, reach out. So very quick conclusion. Oh, good. I've kept this to pretty much under 20 minutes. How good. Conclusion. So we've finished our strength phase. It's been quite traditional. We're now going to be moving into a strength power. The strength power just means that we're transitioning. We're not just going to go straight from strength to power. We still want to keep building muscle as always, but we're going to start now making it, let's call it functional. So we're going to start moving our newfound strength under a bit of speed, which means we're going to reduce the overall load. So tapering will maximize game day performance. So this is also important coming into the carnival. So making sure that we're maximizing that, and really basically by the time you probably get around to watching this, and I do apologize that it has taken a bit, very busy with uni and other stuff, but if you can really maximize those recovery protocols, that's probably going to be the best thing. And then at the bottom, it says there that recovery turns training into performance. So Just remember, guys, your training is probably only about an hour a day, if that, maybe an hour and a half. You've still got around 23 to 22 and a half hours throughout the rest of the day. So making sure that we're maximizing nutrition, we're getting plenty of hydration, not just water. We want to make sure we're getting electrolytes in as well. And then, of course, sleep. That's just going to put you into the best possible position to perform. And not only in sport, when it comes around to exams, guys, same thing: hydration, nutrition, sleep, a little bit of exercise. So those recovery modalities, it's going to help across all facets of life. So hope that has helped, guys. It's very short. I didn't want to waffle on too much. If there's anything else you would like to know in regards to this lecture, please pop in comments, get in contact. If you've got anything you would like me to touch on for the next one, so in the next 5 to 6 weeks, please send that through and I'll do my best to incorporate it and have some strategies there for you. All right, thanks, guys. See you in the gym.